Does anybody have anything on the agenda? Pulling it up now for myself. Looks like there's not even a date for.
We shared the document in the chat.
Thanks, Caro. Well, I guess with no agenda and not many other people, we can just look at issues. So I'll subject you all to backlog grooming. And there's a couple of things I filed. We had a issue, this open. Let me see if I can find it. This one here.
I'm pasted the chat as well.
Ah, thank you. These were the things from the in toto security audit, and I had a response here for each of the 7 things covered. One should be handled with the OmniTrail attester, basically recording file permissions. So even though we capture, anytime we do a hash or digest of a file, we only, that's only based on the content of the file. It's not based on the permissions itself of the file. And so it's possible that someone could be manipulating permissions, making things executable that shouldn't be executable, or other things like that. So that's important to have resolved. We also do need to update the documentation for that still. I think there's an issue right now that's assigned to Frederick, but if anybody wants to write some documentation on that, that would be cool. The other part was configuration files. I think just to start warning against using configuration files, especially in production, is the first part, and then actually deprecating them should be pretty easy to just remove code. There's also the first tutorial on witness.dev has you create a config file, so we should update that as well too. I think, Tom, you wrote that one, or at least that tutorial. And then 3 is recording a hash of the config. I think that this is, I threw out a possible option here of a configuration attester of basically capturing all the command line options that get passed in. I think that would be a pretty easy way to capture kind of a defense in depth above the previous part. The thing with the configuration files is they could be modified in between the time a user creates them and when witness is actually invoked. So you don't know what was in the configuration file. And then recording that would allow you to have a policy to actually validate that witness itself was run with the right set of config values. One of the things we also had been looking at with one of the PRs that Matthias has about the include and exclude club stuff was modifying the schema for materials. I don't know if we also were doing it for products to capture what those parameters were, like if we're including or excluding certain things. It might be nice to not have to modify those schemas, keep them at the same version, and then record this configuration in a separate spot. So that's something else that we could look at. And then I think the layout replays is, it's outside the scope really of Intoto. If you can't manage versions of your policies, that's not really a problem that Intoto itself is solving. But we can point people towards the idea of using TUF. Cairo?
Yeah, for that one, I think it's missing documentation, but we already support our stuff, right? If within Archivista, you can just enable it. If you deploy using our stuff in infrastructure, you could already store the attestation, the policies in. Maybe we can document it as well.
Yeah, that would be cool. I think that's a good way to help do that in shorter term. The link file reuse one, I think, is it interesting? I'm not quite sure the extent of issues with this, because I would imagine that they're basically saying that step names are not unique, and so you should have unique step names, but I don't really know what the problem of that is. Like, if you evaluate the policy, and if your policy evaluates to true for attestations that shouldn't be used, you haven't really written a good policy. So I don't know. Let me go back to the feature, not a bug. Yeah. And that's kind of part of what I had put as well for, using Archivista in the graph, right? You can have that, and then you really should be looking at all the different product digest, materials digest, even the timestamps that we have. I don't really. Oh, nor do they contain timestamps. So and you can also sign with the TSA as well. So yeah, but if you're replacing link files, your inputs and your outputs should likely be different. Unless they're saying you maliciously replace them, in which case you would have to also compromise the key so that you could sign over them. You have to have multiple problems for some of these things to have happened. And then improve verification by functionaries. This one was also incredibly convoluted, of basically saying if you could compromise one functionary and modify the products, you could then submit those products would become the materials for the next step, and those materials could end up escaping the next run because they could be malicious materials, and then they could modify that subsequent attestation or the result of it. So you not only have to compromise the first action that creates an attestation, you have to create some set of output that escapes the next set of attestation, the next step in the pipeline, in order for that to be signed as though it is authentic in some ways, which, like, I guess that's positive if you have then like chained together these three different potential compromises, which also there are plenty of things that occur in CI/CD pipelines that are that accept arbitrary input, right? Like your build process accepts arbitrary input, right? Your Golang compiler takes any set of source code. It has to work that way. So it's the same thing. The product that you produce from a build of a container image is not deterministic, right? So then when you pass that container image into a tool to generate an SBOM or a vulnerability scan result, there's no way to know if it is a secure or malicious container image if it's going to somehow compromise that subsequent tool. And then PGP support is just like, we should update the documentation to say we don't support PGP, which is like, there is no documentation today that says we support PGP. I'm pretty sure there's no issue open requesting support for PGP. But this did also highlight to me in our docs, under the signers, we actually only document the KMS signer. So we should document the others as well too. And I just realized I'm only sharing one tab, not the other things I was showing. But just witness.dev /signers only has the KMS signer there. Yeah, so there's a couple of good first issues in here. The other stuff, it's not super high priority, I don't think. There was also one bug reported before the break about the issues with no proxy, the environmental variable. So this was somebody who was using HTTPS proxy in order to proxy requests to, see if I get this right. They were proxying requests to the TSA was external, so they were using free TSA, but they had an internal full CO instance, and so they wanted that to be set to no proxy, so it would use the internal network. And it's likely that our change for the away from the deprecated what's the gRPC, I think. And so we have a new function to initialize that connection. We put a change in, but it appears as though it didn't work. It would be good to be able to resolve this in some way. I don't know if anybody has experience setting up HTTPS proxies or anything, but
unfortunately I do, so I can try to replicate this locally and see if I can reproduce it.
Yeah, I don't have a good way of trying to figure it out other than just like trying to brute force gRPC config options. Like I don't know why it doesn't just work to begin with, and I'm really hoping it's not a like bug internal to gRPC. There were some previous issues in gRPC related to HTTPS proxy, but they have been solved for like the last couple of years. So unless there's a regression in those things, but the function is only deprecated as well, so we could revert back to the previous function. It's still there, but figuring this out and being able to move forward would be a better solution, I think.
Yeah, I agree. It would be preferable to not rely on deprecated behavior. I also take a look and I'll just read through the documentation and see if they document anything weird about proxies and new settings, but
And then the only other thing from the open source side, we have been saying for a while we were going to do, which is to submit a PR to the In Toto attestations repo for an attestation collection. I think that would be one of these days a good thing to try and do. Mikhail, I don't know if you've ever taken a pass at that or not. I think for me, one of the biggest things is just taking the time to write out the justifications and then also the protobuf definitions. I'm not sure how those work.
I've not done a full in-depth actual pull request of like writing out the definitions. We have had conversations and back and forth on issues about why we think it's relevant. There's been discussions around it and like where does it overlap with other efforts, such as the Sky predicate got brought up a few times. I don't think they're exactly one-to-one, but I definitely think you're right that just going and actually formalizing a real request for it and justifying it is probably the best answer instead of just kind of continually cycling around the same conversations. At least we'll get a definitive answer one way or the other.
Yeah, Aditya has a PR on the attestation verifier to support attestation collections, and there was some pushback against that because it's a special case for a unsupported or an unofficial predicate type. So I think for a beta like experimental project in attestation verifier, it should be fine, but it would just be easier to justify it by saying this is officially approved. So yeah, I think that's pretty much everything on my mind on the open source side. I don't know if there's anything on the Archivista side. Cairo, I don't know if you've seen anything come in recently there.
No, actually, maybe we just need to cut a minor release for the latest updates, including Golang and so on, and update the charts as well. There are something in the charts issues about the versioning, but in order to fix it, it's better to cut a release in Archivista as well. I mean, just a patch release. So
yeah, we should be able to do that pretty easily.
Yeah, I can do it anyway. Yeah. I just wait to sync here in the community call.
Cool. Yeah, it's interesting as we see more and more use of Archivista that it's still like I see more references to uses of Archivista than I do references to uses of Witness, and so it's very interesting to see the repo itself get less fewer issues filed and things like that, but I don't know what we can do about that.
Yeah, I will work in the new release, and I don't know what we can do else there. There's some PRs open that we never moved. Let me check here. Yeah, there's this import feature that might be interesting. Yeah, what I see right now is that, and I don't know the Omni Trail we discussed about that. There are some PRs that few meetings ago we said that might not be interesting to the open source level, that we could maybe close them. Yeah.
Yeah, we should. I'll follow up on those.
Yeah, and the refactoring of the API as well, the package for the API with the HTTP client. I think something that we could also move forward. This is interesting for Testify second way to do internally, but yeah, I think users can get benefit from this HTTP client as well.
Yeah. I hadn't realized until seeing this PR how terrible it is to try and do GraphQL queries when you don't have a schema. It's just like, I can't believe that this is the state of GraphQL. Between this code, and there was a library I've seen used. I forget which one. I'm not sure if it's the same one that we use in here or not. Actually, I don't. This is just raw HTTP requests, I think. But I think there's one other library that's commonly used in Go. That's a very lightweight wrapper around the GraphQL queries with no schema. But what a mess.
Yeah, Go's type system really doesn't lend itself well to the type of like optional, like you can do a lot of code generation to get it done, but it's unfortunate that GraphQL and JavaScript is a much more pleasant experience, or TypeScript, I guess I should say, since you actually get typing them.
Okay, if everyone here agrees, I will cut a patch release for Archivista. I will merge some fixes. Then there's a Go bump that depend about just put, and I will cut a and release.
Yeah, the GQL Gen PR is failing because there's a deprecated function we're using. So that's another one that someone will have to go in and figure out exactly how to do that. It's funny, reading the message for the handler.new default server is deprecated. And then the statement is, this was and is just an example. Not code that someone should actually be using. It was like, well, why was it public to begin with? But anyways.
Yeah, I will clean up things that are pending and cut a patch release. There is no, but without new features or changes. And I will do the same for the Helm charts as well. If nobody has comments about that.
Sounds good.
Yeah, no objections here.
Did anybody have anything else they wanted to chat about today? All right. Well, in that case, we can call the meeting a little bit early, and everybody enjoy your weekends and see you again soon.
Beer time.
Enjoy.
Hope you feel better, John.
Thanks.
Yeah.